Shalom. I hope that you're all well and that you're preparing right now for Shabbat, and it's going to be a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful day and weekend for you. Just a couple things that I want you to do for me. One, hopefully, and if you haven't already, perhaps you can do it, find some time this weekend. The last video I put out was the story of Noah. And indeed, it was straight text. It was straight from the Torah. Didn't make any of it up myself. It was right there. And what I would want you to do, both adults and kids, I want you to find one section of the story and illustrate it for me. Whether you're at the beginning or, about, you can speculate. It doesn't have to be any specifically following the story exactly. You can use your creativity to do your own midrashim. You can figure out if, because the people in the world were doing all these awful things, you can try to guess what they were doing. And you know what? You can even take that time and transplant it to today. What would be the things that people would be doing today that would warrant such a response from God, from Hashem? And why things would have to be wiped completely clean. And I want you to be as accurate to the text, although, as you possibly can. So remember, this story is peopled by a whole lot of different things and people and beings and stuff. I mean, not only there are animals and humans, there are also giants. And there are divine beings. All sorts of different characters in this story. I want you to illustrate that. That's one. Two, I want you, especially the adults, many of the stories, in fact, all of the stories in the first part of Bereshit, are stories that are mythic. In other words, they're stories that are true and have truth in them, but didn't necessarily happen. Meaning that they're stories that someone asked a question about, well, why is this the sky the color that it is? And someone would make up a story about why they believe the sky is that color. And within that story, they would sprinkle in truths about how we should act. And they would accent good character traits like honesty and clarity and calmness or whatever. And they would try to implant upon whoever they were telling the story, not only why the sky is blue, but also why we should be the way that we are and how we have come to the place that we are. Using the why is the sky blue as a starting point. That's two things. So why tell the story of Noah? Why tell the story in the way that it is? And what lessons do we hope and truths do we hope to walk away from it as a people, as individuals, and as Jews? Speaking of Jews, the third and final thing is I want you to start thinking, because we're already, believe it or not, we are starting to think about Hanukkah, or Hanukkah. We're starting to think about Hanukkah. And we're going to start thinking about the story, the true story, the story of the Maccabees, that is the origins of our Hanukkah celebration. And one of the things that the story of Hanukkah is what it means to be Jewish. About you have a bunch of things. You got things that are very, 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 very Jewish, and there are things that are very, 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 very not Jewish. And there's all stuff in between, and they overlap. And what we have to figure out is where on that spectrum that you're going from very, 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 very only Jewish stuff, and no one only does only Jewish stuff. They do a lot of stuff. But where on that spectrum that you go starting to go further and further away from the purely just Jewish stuff to the non-Jewish stuff, and in the Hanukkah story, the Hellenistic stuff, at what point along that way do you start to become more Hellenistic than Jewish? And we're going to explore that. And there are no right or wrong answers in this case. I mean, with very few exceptions. There might be, but from very few exceptions. And it's for each family to decide and explore for themselves. And I'm very, very happy for you guys to share it, but we're going to do it in a very, very safe way. So I want you to start thinking about things that you consider that are just purely, purely only Jewish, and things that are completely not, the opposite of that. And it could be food, ways of thinking, ways of playing, games, relationship, whatever. Because I'm going to be asking you to put them into sort of categories later on next week. So start thinking about that. And that's something that you can talk about with each other. And start having a mindfulness, if I can be Northern Californian, mindfulness about the things that we do, the things that we like, and what our self-identity is. So, until then, so illustration, why we tell stories like the story of Noah, and what it means to be a Jew. Not some rabbi's idea, not my idea, but your idea as a family, communally as a family. I'm interested in you. I'm not interested in Rambam. I'm not interested in any fantastic or even not fantastic rabbi story about what makes a Jew. I'm interested in how you perceive that in your vision for that. So, until next week, I wish you well. Be healthy. Always be healthy. Be well, and Shabbat Shalom.